Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Planning and Development Council of the Town of Oakville. Madam Clerk, do we have any regrets this evening?
I have no regrets for tonight's meeting.
All right, thank you. Councilor, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Thank you. So if I could have a mover and seconder resolve in a committee of the whole. Councilor Khan and Councilor Robinson, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Now, for the public's benefit, Planning and Development Council, because there's so many of you here and I don't recognize so many of your faces, Planning and Development Council goes into what we call Committee of the Whole in order to relax the rules and make sure that everybody has a chance to get their information out. On the matter which draws most of you here tonight, we won't be making a decision. We'll be receiving your information, and it's very important to Council to get your information and to staff as well. Later on, with due notice to everybody, Council will receive a report from staff with a final recommendation on the file. So tonight is a fact-finding, information-gathering session. With that, I'll turn to the agenda. The first two items are consent items. The subdivision agreement for Mattamy Preserve, Lower Fourth Limited Phase 1A, and Pendant Phase 1A, also Mattamy Preserve. Councilor Khan, are you moving the consent items? Councilor Knoll? Somebody? Anybody? Councilor Knoll, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? And the consent items are adopted. All right, now that brings us to the main business of the evening, our public hearing items. And the way a public hearing works, let me just read this. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submission to the Town of Oakville in respect of a proposed official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and/or plan of subdivision or condominium, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of Town Council to the Ontario Municipal Board and may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Municipal Board unless, in the opinion of the Board, there are reasonable grounds to do so. And I hope you noticed in there that written is as good as oral or verbal. And if you have sent us written remarks, there is, I guarantee you, Council reads everything, and they're as good as heard. So you can't make it better by saying it over again. We will listen to it over again, but you can't make it better by saying it over again. So with that, we'll turn now to our planning staff. And there he is. Gabe Charles will give a summary of the report that Council's received for the benefit of the public, if any members of the public haven't also seen the report. Mr. Charles, we're all ears.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There, now she comes back. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of Council. This is a statutory public meeting for an application by 231-7511 Ontario Inc. for a property at 70 Old Mill Road. Mr. Mayor, as you noted, staff will be taking note of the public's comments throughout this process with the intent of providing Council with a recommendation in the future. We have not yet established what that date will be. Now, Council will also find on your desk a copy of the correspondence that we have received even up until 6 o'clock this evening. The property is located at 70 Old Mill Road, northwest corner of Old Mill and Cornwall. It's located within Midtown Oakville. The property is currently vacant. There are 3 condominium buildings to the west of the subject site, 40, 50, and 60 Old Mill. There is a rail corridor directly north of the site, as well as a recently constructed parking garage by Metrolink, 6-story garage just to the east. And there's also an Oakville transit station just on the north side of the GO station. The proposal is to accommodate a mixed-use building composed of 29 residential units, up to 2,300 square meters of office, 930 square meters 2,300 square meters of retail, 930 square meters of office. I think was it was supposed to be written. The intent is to bring the zoning on the site into conformity with the official plan by rezoning the property to a mix of residential, office, and retail. The building itself is 9 stories in height with 82 parking spaces. This slide illustrates the site plan. Old Mill Road is along the north. The condo buildings, the existing condo buildings are to the bottom part of the screen with Cornwall Road on the right-hand side. It identifies some of the surface parking that's being proposed as part of the application, as well as the parking on Old Mill Road itself. This render, it just illustrates the massing as well as a pedestrian access to Cornwall Road. There is a fair amount of history with this particular site, which began in 1994. 50 Old Mill was constructed in 1999, 60 Old Mill the year following. There was a zoning amendment application in 2001, which looked to increase the height at the 40 Old Mill site to 16 stories, as well as increase the overall number of dwellings across the entire site up to 347. And a fair amount of this background is detailed in the staff report for further information. The application back in 2001 also included a proposal for 22 residential units on the 70 Old Mill site. There was a bylaw that was subsequently adopted by council, which did incorporate a number of minor zoning revisions. And then development for the site did proceed by way of site plan and condominium applications. The creation or the registration of the condominiums at 40, 50, and 60 by default had created the 70 Old Mill site. And in 2012, there was a site plan approval which applied to all of 40 through 70. In 2012, that site plan approval was amended so that it would only apply to 40 through 60, so that any subsequent development, should it proceed at 70, would be subject to its own site plan application. As noted, the property is located within Midtown Oakville. The property is designated as high-density residential. Midtown is the town's urban growth center. The high-density residential designation does permit up to 185 units per site hectare by virtue of the size of the property. The application includes 29 residential units. There's also the site-specific policy, which applies, that provides a maximum or permits up to a maximum of 2,300 square meters of retail and 930 square meters of office. The policy does recognize the historical permissions which were in place by virtue of the previous zoning that was done. The permitted height is between, does require a minimum of 6 stories and does include up to a maximum of 12 stories on the site. The site-specific includes the 3 residential buildings. The site-specific zone includes the 3 residential buildings to the west. It does include permission for a 3-story commercial building on the 70 Old Mill site, which is identified in gray on the slide there. It does permit up to 3,230 square meters, essentially, of retail, which is almost 35,000 square feet. As noted, the proposed rezoning does intend to bring the zoning for the subject site into conformity with the official plan designation by recognizing the proposed residential use, the building height, and the commercial uses. In terms of some of the matters under consideration are those issues which we have heard either through emails and correspondence or at the public information meeting, including the functionality of the site in terms of how the commercial uses would work and how access would be granted to the commercial uses from a parking perspective. What is the appropriate parking ratio for the site, given that we're in Midtown Oakville? How much office and retail makes sense for this particular site? The availability of servicing is something that we need to look at, as well as how we would regulate the height and massing of the proposed use. Just in terms of next steps, a recommendation report will be prepared for council in the near future. We haven't established a date as of yet. Staff will continue to review the application and comments received from the public, town departments, public agencies, and if there are any questions, we'd be pleased to answer those now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Charles, for the report. Council, do you have questions for Mr. Charles? Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In terms of the parking on Old Mill, I believe the sketch shows 7 parallel parking spaces. Are those private spaces or are those town parking spaces?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, those parking spaces would be located on town property within the Old Mill right-of-way. assuming this application, if it goes through in some context, that's how the parking would be located along Old Mill. We'd review that through the site plan application.
Metered parking.
Potentially, through you, Mr. Mayor, it could be metered. Hasn't been determined yet.
Right, thank you. And in terms of at a Metrolink seminar, open house a year and a half or so ago, there was talk at one point of the possibility that there may be interest in making a right turn lane onto Old Mill, right turn onto Cornwall/Spears. Does that have any impact, or are you aware of any further discussions on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, not aware of anything to that extent as of right now. It's not something that I'm familiar with at this point as it relates to this particular application. That said, we are aware that Metrolinx is conducting a traffic study of the greater area as it relates to the functionality of their GO stations along Trafalgar, parts of Cross Avenue, etc. It's feasible that that issue could come up through that that transportation study, and that I believe is anticipated to be wrapped up end of this year.
Councilor Byrne?
Yeah, I just wanted to, and Dave asked the question as to, I guess, the precedent-setting nature of counting the parking spots on the town road allowance as somehow contributing to the development. On page 153, you'll see that the spaces are all being included in the surface parking for the development. So you say that's to be determined, and whether in fact someone can designate parking spots on public road allowance as private use
Through you, Mr.
for development purposes?
The parking would be reviewed in the context of the overall development. Historically, we do not count parking which is on street towards a private development. I don't see that being any different in this particular case, so it's something that we'll have to look at more specifically. Again, in terms of the exact location of where the parking would be, if it's metered, those types of things, we'll need to get into that a little bit more.
Well, this is just a comment. I saw that. Then glad Dave picked it up. That's the first time I've ever heard of it. We don't even have a on-street permit program, let alone suggesting that there's ownership to parking spots on the road allowance in front of my home. I mean, if I was trying to really rack my brain to think what other development have we ever had that done. We don't do it in the central business district. I'm surprised that in the Midtown core that this would even be contemplated. So when I picked that up, and in my experience, once people see them in maps and charts and drawings and say it's proposed, then why didn't you bring it up then? This is the time that I'm bringing it up. That's certainly, we're treading on a whole new path of development if we start to allow that as a condition of rezoning in order to get a bigger building, then, because parking is one of those constraints for most current developments. Anyway, that's the comment. I would like to hear what the residents have to say. May have some more questions later.
Thank you, Councilor Byrd. Any other members of council with questions for staff? All right, then. Thank you, Mr. Charles. So now what we're going to do is we're going to turn to the public to receive information that any member of the public may have for council on this matter. And I believe we have a number of delegations who've signed up in advance, but we'll also poll the audience. So if you didn't sign up, you'll still get an opportunity if you think of something that you'd like to share with council. And if you've ever been somewhere and on the way home you think, gee, I wish I'd said, your opportunity to tell us things doesn't end tonight. If you think of something on the way home, you can send it to us in any form, written, email, whatever. The wicket's still open. So don't be uneasy about that side of the thing. Madam Clerk, would you call the first listed delegation?
The first delegation is Ms. Lynn Townsend from Townsend and Associates representing Halton Condominium Corporation.
Welcome, Ms. Townsend. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Members of Council, yes, I am here on behalf of Halton Condominium Corporation 397, And this is the condominium corporation at 60 Old Mill. So it's the property directly adjacent and to the west of 70 Old Mill, which is in front of you for consideration tonight. My retainer is with the board of directors of the condominium corporation to come forward and share with you concerns that they see at this time. There will be others, I suspect, who are residents within the building who may have something to say. And indeed, there are other buildings at 40 and 50 Old Mill who may speak independently of what I'm offering this evening. I've had several meetings with the board of directors, or at least those who've been appointed to meet with me, and what I'm told is that they are not against development of this property. While they would have preferred that it be a park, the attempt to purchase it for parkland was not successful, and they recognize, as we've gone through with them, the provisions of livable Oakville. Mr. Charles has just gone through those with you as well. And so those are a reality, and they have to be faced. So what we've talked about is what are the key issues as they are emerging now, and there will be ongoing work on these issues. But key issue, as raised earlier, is parking. Not only the on-street parking, but any other kind of parking would have to go underground, and to the extent there's retail or office, that can pose a challenge, particularly for retail. The parking spaces that you saw on that conceptual site plan, and I stress it's conceptual, there has not been a site plan application filed yet. Those parking spaces don't appear to jive with the actual site plan line. So some of those, part of those parking spaces may indeed belong to the other condominiums. So parking is an issue. Access is an issue. There's a shared facilities agreement on title. My clients, as well as the boards of directors of the other two buildings, have retained the services of Miller Thompson, Audrey Loeb in particular, who has provided an opinion on the shared facilities agreement. And that will have to be communicated to the team for the developer, because there is going to be a need, in my estimation, for everybody to get along here, for more than just being good neighbors. If you've been out to the site and you enter in one way into the parking garage and you exit out another, and the shared facilities agreement, while it doesn't prevent the entrance, it certainly prevents the exit to being used from 70 Old Mill, although that's something to be discussed between the lawyers who specialize in that discipline. So these are things that are going to have to be discussed over time. Obviously, the height and the use, the commercial use, that drives the parking, that drives access. So all of that has to be sort of reviewed in a package to see something that's workable. I have said to the clients that I think this is an appropriate application where a site plan should be filed concurrent with the other application, the zoning bylaw application, because there's only so much you can do with the zoning bylaw, and ultimately, if there is a development approved on this property, it should be what we call shrink wrapped, put into a site plan so that there isn't any concern about where the parking spaces are and how the access and the loading and everything will be addressed in the end. And there also seems to be some fluctuating numbers in terms of the site size and what parking standards are being used. So all of that could be addressed through a site plan. I have communicated to the lawyers for the developer in the last couple of days when we connected with each other that my clients are prepared to sit down and work with them. And we'd like to work with town staff and see if we can't come up with a resolution to the challenges around this site. It is an awkward site, potentially has some concerns with respect to right turn lanes. But we get all that information on the table, walk through what might be acceptable for everybody, and see if we can't come up with a win-win. So my clients have indicated to me a willingness to embark on that path. It's going to take some time. I would ask on their behalf that this matter not come back until after the summer. To allow for that to happen. Summer, it's going to be hard to get the residents together to talk about it. We'll try to do as much as we can before then. But if it could come back later in the year, that would be very helpful. So I think I have conveyed the thoughts of the Board of Directors, but as I say, you may hear from others within the building this evening.
Thank you very much, Ms. Townsend. Councillor Bird.
Thank you very much, Lynn. You're aware that there currently is a site plan filed with this, on this site, which was done at the original rezoning on the other three buildings?
Well, what happened, yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, what happened in 2012 was a piece of land was carved off for 70 Old Mill. So the site plan now only applies to 40, 50, and 60. And there's a piece that will need a site plan application for 70.
But there is a site plan that was filed with this site, concurrent, because at the time it was rezoned, we didn't know the phasing. It was 3 residential buildings, 10 stories in height, and 1 commercial. I just got picked up when you said, well, we should have a site plan filed with it because we should shrink wrap this. I think we tried to do that a few years ago, but there was no way we could get the builder to build it in the normal sort of sequence, nor all according to the filed rezoning, nor the site plan. So we're now back to an approved site plan, or one on record, and we want to, I can see trying to tweak that, or you're sort of starting all over de novo.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't think there is an approved site plan any longer on 70 Old Mill's vacant land. So I think there's a chance to start over, and I certainly take your point and have communicated it to my clients that it would not stop a developer from coming forward after an approval. This isn't like a contract that you sign, a rental contract, a tenancy agreement. This is under the Planning Act, so that it can come forward in the future and ask for changes. And I do know that the town has made a number of efforts over the years to try and tie down what will happen on this property, and we're facing those challenges again.
And there's no guarantee anyone will build according to the agreement.
That's, through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. They
Yeah.
can come back with another application. At the moment, though, it is, there isn't a companion site plan application. You have a conceptual drawing in front of you as part of your package that raises the issues I brought to the attention of council earlier.
And I'm just assuming that this previously floated by this developer is a non-starter?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, there are a number of issues that arise as a result of that particular proposal.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Giddings.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Townsend, you mentioned the shared facilities agreement. Not something for us to talk about, civil matter between 40, 50, 60, and 70. Question, you mentioned that as of right, they can enter the parking garage and they can't exit the parking garage. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's a shared facilities agreement between 40, 50, and 60 Old Mill, and 70 is also, as I understand it, a party in some capacity, and I am reaching into an area of the law where I don't belong, but I'll do my best to answer your question. What the shared facilities agreement does is it has a specific clause that talks about what 70 Old Mill can do in terms of its use of the parking garage. So the issue up for discussion is that it's quite clear they can enter into the parking garage, just like 40, 50, and 60, but they can't exit out of the parking garage because there's entry is on the east end of the site, the exit's on the west end of the site. And the 2 lawyers who specialize in this will ultimately have a discussion about the shared facilities agreement. And while that may indeed be a civil matter, a planning matter is access. So we've got to, I think, satisfy your legal department as to whether or not access can indeed be gained, access and egress gained through the building, because the site circulation will depend on that.
Thank you. And you would concur that those discussions and resolving would be better off being done sooner rather than later?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, through a part of this process, absolutely. Just as this, the comments are received and discussions are held in the normal course of processing and development.
Well, the developer has an option to exit onto Old Mill then through their own exit. I've never been down to the garage. I'm familiar with the site. But that is one of the other options. They could exit directly onto Old Mill.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, correct. And that, from the discussions I've had with the board members, would be a more acceptable solution. But I think the proposal on the table right now is to use the parking garage. So if the building could be redesigned in such a way that that could occur and off the exit off onto Old Mill, I think that becomes more workable. But then we have to get the technical people involved to ensure that it meets the fire department requirements and all that type of thing. Old Mill's a fairly short street and fairly heavily traveled.
Solve one concern, it may raise some other issues.
Exactly.
All right, thank you.
Things we need to talk about.
Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Ms. Townsend. Has Audrey Loeb given an opinion on this shared facility agreement, or is that privileged right now?
She, through you, Mr. Mayor, she has given an opinion, but to the 3 buildings, 40, 50, and 60. And the opinion was just finalized either late in the day, Friday or today. And I don't have, and I'm not in a position to share that yet with anyone, but I understand that there's discussions going on about releasing that opinion publicly.
It seems like dialogues are going well, but as between your group and the developer, you have ongoing discussions. Have you approached this issue about a site plan being submitted with the application, and also about delaying the process until after summer with the developer? And are they friendly to that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I have not had, other than this evening when I met the developers, and their legal counsel was only just appointed, as was their planner. I just learned of this on Friday afternoon. So I have not had one-on-one discussions, but the developer has approached my clients and said that, and I think they have had meetings where they've sat down and sort of talked through some of these issues. I did make it clear to one of the lawyers, the real estate lawyer who I spoke to a week ago for the developers, that I thought a site plan would be necessary. And that may indeed well be in the works, that they're thinking about that. But we're just at the beginning of entering into this dialogue. And the reason I say this, we've got to get through the summer, is first of all, I think there's an awful lot more information required on this application. I haven't gone through the inconsistency in the statistics and the work that needs to be done. And my understanding is for a report to get on council agenda for a decision before the summer, you'd almost have to have that report completed in the next couple of weeks. And I'm not sure that all the discussions could be undertaken in that particular time frame. And then we run into summer holidays, and it's been my experience with this council that you typically wouldn't take an issue with this much residents' involvement to a decision in the course of the summertime.
And just to be clear, so you're being retained by 60 Old Mill, and by the board, a
By the
specific
board of directors, yes, not by
And
the residents.
they, in principle, are supportive of the application pending certain discussions, but you can't speak for the ones at 40 and 50, and there might be some opposition from them still.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I want to be very careful that what they have said is they do not oppose development of the site. It's all about what that development is going to look like. I think you'll see some correspondence saying 6 stories is livable, something they can work with. I think there's some concern about the commercial uses. So I think we're a long way from saying that they can, but I definitely do not speak for 40 or 50.
Any others? Ms. Townsend, our first meeting of Planning and Development Council in September is on the 9th. And we declared this application complete on February 13th, on March 13th or February 13th? On February 13th.
February 13th.
So what's your sense of the timing of this?
Mr. Mayor, when I'm on the other side, I would have thought that was a record for processing a development application. So I think that would be very, very fast to get it to September the 9th after declaring it complete on the 13th of February. But if that's council's direction, then...
No,
yeah,
I'm not giving any guidance or direction. I'm just trying to do the math. 2 plus 6 is 8. So presumably on or about August 13th, there's an opportunity to appeal, a failure to decide, right?
It's a zoning bylaw application, so it's 120 days.
Oh, so even sooner. So I guess the question that I'm asking is in response to your suggestion that we spend more time, where would you like this decided?
Well, I mean, I'm in your hands. I'm in your hands as to how you want to approach the application. All I'm saying is the realities are that for the board of directors to reach out to the actual unit owners, and then to also reach out to 40 and 50 and get all of that done with meetings with the developer. We're at the 21st of May, and to make that happen over the course of the next 4 weeks is going to be very difficult.
I understand. My own preference is for decisions made in Oakville. And, you know, we've had a lovely run at the board. I'm not afraid to go there, but, you know, you're asking, it's, you know, being on this side of the question becomes you, I should say, by the way. And it's very interesting to pose this question to you. And you don't have to answer us tonight, of course, but it is you know, the timing, you raised the timing issue, and I wanted to be sure you were considering the impact on where it would be decided.
Yes, and I do very much appreciate you raising that for the benefit of those in the room as well.
Okay, super. I have no other questions, and if no other member of council has, Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, through you, Worship, and thank you for raising that, because that was the concern I had, was appreciating what you had referred to as the fact that council does not like taking or making decisions of a certain nature during the summer months, but given the clock is ticking, the restraints involved, and I don't know, is the applicant here tonight?
Yes.
We might, okay, because I may be able to ask them in terms of the timing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That would be very grateful for that question.
So thanks very much for your information.
All right, and I may have to step out before the item is finished, and if I do, I apologize. I mean no
All right.
disrespect.
We have no extra formality here. You don't have to bow or anything. Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation, please?
The next delegation is Mr. Dave Archibald, the Director of the Trafalgar Chartwell Residents Association, along with Peter DeRosa, the Vice President.
Mr. Archibald, welcome. Mr. DeRosa, welcome.
Good evening, everyone.
Council looks forward to your information. As much as you can, if you speak at the microphone, it'll assist people to hear you.
Okay. Well, councilors, Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Peter DeRosa. I'm VP with Trafalgar Chartwell Residents Association. And David Archibald, who is was with me, is both director and TCRA resident of the TCRA and a resident of the Oak Ridge Heights condo complex. In an email that was sent by the TCRA to the town clerk dated May the 10th, 2013, the TCRA expressed its concerns over the impact of this development on traffic, parking, streetscape, infrastructure, and density. Concerns that mirror those expressed by the residents of the Oak Ridge Heights in a letter to the town that was dated recently, May the 16th, 2013. Basically, council is asked to approve the Apache application provided these critical issues are dealt with. First issue is that the new site plan be refiled to include all of the areas that affect traffic and access issues. The second point being provide for at least 157 parking spaces as required by the bylaw, because the Apache proposes only 82 spaces currently. Provide sufficient underground parking with access directly onto the Old Mill Road. Reduce building mass to the benefit of more parking above grade, appropriate loading dock, and better circulation. Restrict the building heights to 6 stories, preferably all residential, which will mitigate most of the traffic, access, and circulation issues brought on by the commercial component in the development. Resolve legal issues around the shared facilities before development commences, and conform to the Oakville livable plan, respecting streetscape and conformity with the area south of the train station. I had some slides that I brought in. Were you received?
Well, we have technical assistance available, and if you'll just stand by, and Madam Clerk, you could stop the clock. Councillor Elger?
Your Worship, I had an eye operation last week, and I'm going to put sunglasses on. It's not that I don't want to look at the people speaking, so I'll be putting my sunglasses on. Thank you.
All right. Well, you protect your vision. That's more important than any fear of offense that you might give.
We can go directly to
We'll have to get you a supply of sunglasses you
slides,
can
the first
rotate.
slides. This one here. This one here, yeah. Just to provide you with some visuals, this is the general look of the area currently. And the plan development with the original 3-story proposal. So the more fading look would be that of the original development by United Lands, who proposed and received approval for the 3-story commercial building in 2003. That developer eventually opted out because the marketing difficulties of the commercial facilities. and abandoned the project in favor of adding additional residential units on 40 Old Mill. That concludes my presentation, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for the time. If you have any questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Giddings will have at least one for you. But
Thank
you don't
you.
have to stop there.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. DeRosa, the picture here, is it the height of the building that you prefer, or is it the look of it in terms of?
No, it's primarily the look, because it doesn't fit with the existing buildings that are there now. If I can go back. So it's primarily the look.
All right, thank you. And
Maybe I can just add to that a
well,
little bit, Dave.
for your partner there, I have two questions for you. I'd like
Okay.
your input on that one, as well as whether you've noticed a difference in traffic flow or volume since GO Transit put the new parking structure up.
Okay, on the first one, the description, or the buildings that are nearby, which are, of course, the old Oakville Market, which are 3 stories, 2-story buildings, as well as the Sunrise Building across the street, as well as the parking garage. They're all of the same color, nature, and size roughly. They're brick, red brick with some cement and white trim. The proposal that exists does not conform at all with that look. And all we are saying is, let's continue that look for that area south of the tracks. We can understand it's a good-looking building, but maybe that kind of a building belongs north of the tracks, not south of the tracks, to fit in with the neighborhood. And the second one is the traffic improved or changed since the GO parking was installed. Well, first, the existing parking lot that I thought GO expected would not be used as much, it is filled by 10 after 8 in the morning. So there has been no change as far as how many cars are coming out or going in to that specific parking lot than what was before. However, we do have the addition of the kiss and ride going through the new parking lot. So therefore, the traffic does back up. And in fact, I've got photos, and they might be part of one of the, actually this package right here. The picture on the bottom, if we can just take a quick look at that, the cars are lined up almost all the way to the kiss and ride to get onto the street, Old Mill, to get through the lights.
And is your guardhouse still used as a kiss and ride as well?
Unfortunately, it does. It's, there are, I did a little survey one day as the number of people coming off the train for the kiss and ride. And roughly a third of the people coming out for kiss and ride are picking up their rides, not in the kiss and ride zone, but on Old Mill, and using our roadway to make a U-turn and go around through.
Any other members of council with questions? Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your information. Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
The next delegation is Lori McPherson here on behalf of the applicant, and has requested that she speak after all of the members of the audience, if that's possible.
I don't have a particular problem with that. Is there any other listed?
No.
Are there any other members of the public with information for council on this file? Ma'am, I see your arm, but not, come on down and please introduce yourself and share your information with council.
My name is Jane Huddleston, and I'm a resident of Building 40. And I have some photos that Mr. Charles already showed. This photo.
So the way that works is face up in the square, and then they'll turn the camera on.
Just give it a minute.
Mr. Charles already showed that photo, but I would like to show how it is not only not accurate, but I would actually call it a work of fiction, because it does not show in any manner the actual surroundings of the building. It shows a building sitting in some nice surroundings, but it does not show the surroundings that are present at Old Mill Road in Cornwall and at Oak Ridge Heights. And this is a photograph shot from as close as one can get to the same vantage point. But
Well, one second. I wonder, hello, the bus, can we get on the council monitors the same overhead projection that the audience can see, please? Here we go. All right, council. So would you like to, maybe you should, I mean, just back up.
okay.
Because council didn't get to see your first one
Okay.
very well. And while you're positioning that, let me tell you that council knows that these artists' concepts, they're not the application. We've seen many a fancy thing, but that's not what's actually before us.
Yes, and I know that it can and probably will, in this case, change
Yeah.
as the application goes forward. But my point is just to show that what we have in a plan is not an accurate plan at this point, and that we, the stakeholders, and you, the council, have a right to see a plan that incorporates Oak Ridge Heights as part of the surroundings and incorporates the actual surroundings on other sides. Cornwall Road is not a quiet two-lane road, and there is no park on the west side of Old Mill Road. In actual fact, if I shot that from the best vantage point as close to this, if I shot this photo from the truest vantage point that the artist's rendering is done from, you would see chain link fence and the hoods of cars in the foreground.
Yeah. So the assurance I'll give you is that planning staff and council, we've seen all the tricks, don't worry. Okay. But thank you for pointing that out.
And I would just also like to add that there has been a lot of emphasis on Building 60, and that we have a petition that was submitted this morning as part of the information that was submitted to you, with 74 signatures from Building 40 alone on it, not opposing development of Lot 40, but objecting to this particular plan.
Right. So do I accurately hear you as being concerned about how well it fits the character of your existing neighborhood?
Absolutely, as well as the really, really difficult parking problems and traffic congestion.
Sure, sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Giddings has a question for you. Don't rush away.
Thank you, Ms. Huddleston. You mentioned in your correspondence earlier your concern with narrowing the existing driveway. Can you detail that for us?
Yes, I have another photo that shows looking straight up the driveway. And you will see right in the middle of it, there's a drain. And the information that I've been given is that those parking spots that are shown on this part of the plan in the driveway will narrow the driveway, as it's shown in this photo, to where that drain sits, which you can see will not have an in and an out simultaneously. And there will be the danger of a car backing from one of those parking spots into incoming traffic or outgoing traffic. And at the same time, there'll be traffic coming from three directions, because the residential drop-off is shown right on the curve from that narrowed incoming driveway where they turn into the underground garage. So there'll be traffic coming out from the west side of Oak Ridge Heights in through a narrowed driveway, turning to the left, and a drop-off right in the path of all those directions.
Thank you. Could you, with that still up, so that's the parking spaces 27 to 32 that you reference. Could you just put your finger or your pen where the guardhouse is there, just so I can make sure I'm...
Right there.
All right, thank you. And you mentioned in your correspondence concern over a loading dock or lack of. Could you clarify that for me?
Well, in the report by Upper Canada Consultants that was done for Apache Development, it says that the loading dock will be taken out of the public domain and not produce any noise or obstruction in the public realm. But it doesn't show a loading dock on here, so what I see is, yes, it may come out of the public realm, but it will go squarely into our driveway because there's no place else for it.
All right, thank you. I guess that'll be a question we have for Ms. McPherson, for the proponent. Anything
Okay.
else?
No, that's all.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public with additional information to share? Yes, could you come down, introduce yourself, please? And if there, I'm going to ask again, and if you would move, if you raise your hand, I will invite you down. So anticipate me, move closer to the center so that you can be there. I don't see anyone else coming, so welcome, sir. Please introduce yourself and share your information.
Good evening, Fernando Kaila, resident of 60 Old Mill Road. I'm just going to reiterate some of the supportive points because I do support the project. Being a resident at 60 Old Mill, I understand and being in real estate, I understand the complexities between developer, resident. Having attended all the various meetings for the proposed development and reviewed the materials presented by Apache, I do support express my support for the project. The 2 points of concerns from the residences that have been repetitive through the meetings were, of course, the parking and security. I've been there a year and a half now, and again, the agreement with the common use between 4050 and 1670, quite simply, the surface parking and the 6 parking visitor spots allocated underground, from my experience, I park right next to the visitors. All 6 have been vacant for the majority of the time I've resided there. The surface parking, there's always abundance. So again, 2 points where I think we need to be more open to the full use of the various shared parking facilities. As for security, multifamily typically offers a more secure environment, and a solution for the underground parking access, if it does become entry through east and exit through the west, I mean, that's a monitoring issue, which is currently monitored quite well through our security, of course. Perhaps an alternate for the deficiency in the parking, maybe there's an initiative considered for, a car share or something like that, something, from the more larger metropolises, of course. And, the other perspective is perhaps the spaces that are vacant and available from the current 40, 50, and 60 could be either leased, thus generating income for those condominium corporations. I'm not sure if that's never been discussed. There's always been, what is to be done and not how can we offer a solution. Lastly, the long-term economic security of Oakville is reliant on these types of developments. I trust the residents will benefit from increased property values and a fulfillment of an enhanced community with the addition of 70 Old Mill Road. The site does meet all the variables of a livable Oakville plan, and continued through the support of town, inform residents and investments like this one from Apache. I'm sure the town will succeed in achieving this initiative.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Questions? Thank you. Anyone else? There we go. Any other members of the public with information for council on this? Ms. Bosfield, I'm sorry, the lady from Bosfield. What's her name? Oh, yeah, Ms. McPherson. Oh, there you are.
Hi.
Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. My name is Lori McPherson. I'm with Bousfields, and we are part of the team representing the applicant, and we're one of the planning consultants. I just wanted to say that my client wants to work with the Condo Corp and with the council and staff and come up with something that works for everybody. And I do just want to emphasize that they are the new owners. They weren't involved at the previous schemes. When they purchased the site, Livable Oakville was in place. As you've heard from Mr. Charles, the minimum height in the area is 8 to 12 stories for the 6 to 12 stories. And the site is designated for high-density residential. The previous approval permits about 35,000 square feet of commercial space, both retail and office. This application reduces that to about 32,000, so about 3,000 square feet of commercial less than the current provision. And they've added 29 units. So the units aren't on top of the previous approval. They have taken away some of the commercial approvals that they already have. We do have our lawyer, legal, with us to talk about if the council would like to hear it about the easement situation, but we welcome the invitation by Ms. Townsend to sit down and go through that. From a practical point of view, one would think if that piece of land had rights to access the parking garage, they would have to have rights somewhere to exit the parking garage too. But I will leave that to the legal folks. The other point I just want to raise is, as you know, they do have the zoning and official plan to do the 35,000 square feet of commercial right now, so they could come in tomorrow with a site plan and building permit for that. And this whole issue of the easement and who can go in where and out where and who gets to use the parking wouldn't even be before this committee or this council. The site plan committee would eventually take a look at it, but not in terms of who gets to use it. So the whole reason this has been brought forward to you is because they are seeking a rezoning to add the 29 units. But as I said, we welcome the opportunity to sit down and sort that out. Just another point on the parking. I know that Councillor Bird, I believe, asked the question about, is it unusual to have parking permitted on the street and count towards the provision? I just wanted to point out the site-specific zoning bylaw and the zoning that is contained in the town zoning bylaw has a specific provision, and that's where this came from. It wasn't just an idea that my client came up with. It talks about the commercial uses and the requirement for one paved parking space for 28 square meters, but it says, and 7 spaces may be provided on the west side of the Old Mill Road allowance, provided there is a minimum sidewalk width for pedestrian use of 1.7 meters between the edge of the non-street parking and the building at 70 Old Mill Road. So just to give you a little historic perspective where that 7 spaces came from, it was written into the bylaw. In terms of Ms. Townsend's suggestion that we submit a site plan application to go concurrently, we are certainly willing to submit and have and to refine and provide more details on a conceptual site plan application. I have worked on many, many files in this town and very many complicated files in this town, and we very, very, very rarely would come forward with a complete site plan application until the details are known and we're moving forward, because as you know, the site plan process and requirements are quite detailed and tie themselves to a specific proposal. So until we really know where we're all going with this, we'd be happy to come up with a conceptual plan that can be tied down in the zoning through setbacks and step backs and height and parking and all of the things that we typically do, and do it through a conceptual site plan so that we can use that as the basis to tie it down. Through that, we can deal with such issues as loading, garbage, parking, and make sure staff is satisfied that those can work. But at this point, generally one would not complete a site plan application until we are more sure about the direction of the zoning. That being said, I've checked with my client, and they are satisfied to have the report go no sooner than the September meeting. Not during the summer, assuming that we are progressing and we are meeting and we are dealing with issues with staff. So that isn't an issue. They do not intend to appeal before that time, assuming we are all working together and meeting and proceeding. So I can provide that assurance. In terms of the design, again, design really is a site plan issue, and it's a very personal thing. People like modern, people like traditional. I think compatible doesn't necessarily mean the same. However, that being said, you know, we're certainly willing to work with staff and with the corporations to look at some ideas that may make people feel more comfortable with the design. That's open too. So we wrote down all of the comments we heard, and I just wanted to point out some of those items to answer questions that have come up, and I'm here to answer any questions you have, and I do have some other team members here if I can't answer the questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and I will take you up on some of those opportunities to ask you a few questions. But first, Councillor Bird.
Thank you very much about trying to clarify the on-street parking, and you sort of skipped over the word may, and I can tell you the thought process in those that we did not know the type of retail at the bottom floor at that point in time, but realized that most retail need convenient parking in and out, and it was sort of considered they would be convenient sort of stores like a dry cleaner or a coffee shop or whatever it is. So the placement of convenient on-street parking, maybe 15-minute meters or whatever to get turnover, would be an assistance to the commercial aspect. And if anybody recalls, we were familiar with the advantage of 3 parking spots on the corner of Allen Street and Lakeshore to accommodate effectively the LCBO that was there. There was no other parking in that deal other than a private parking, but those 3 short-term parking seemed to generate the turnover they now have, as you know, downtown their own. So that was the thought process, but it said may. There was no way that I think anybody thought that the ownership or the revenues from SEM would be vested with the owners of this parking. But having said that, was there ever considered by your client an option to do away with the commercial on this building in its entirety and go all residential?
I have not had that, through you, Mr. Mayor, I have not had that discussion with my client because the proposal they have come forward with is the combination mixed use.
Yeah, they've come up very,
However, that is
sizes of
certainly
increasing the amount of residential. Why not go all residential, then solve some of the security problems and all this by visitor parking or unauthorized access to what is now secured parking? Mm-hmm. Is there another option out there, or are we going to spend the next 6 months debating the merits of what this application?
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, that's something we'll definitely talk about. It was raised today by someone as well. I haven't had that conversation with them, but I know we will have that after
So
today.
you haven't ruled it out, but we have no instruction to go forward on anything other than what you have?
Yes, the current proposal tries to build on the previous approvals and just modify it somewhat, but certainly we can have that conversation.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple of questions, but before that, I just want to ask our staff a couple of preliminary questions. I'm not sure what you would refer to this in development matters, but for instance, in insurance matters, you have tolling agreements where you can waive strict timeline applications. Do we have anything like that here where they're willing to waive the 120 days that we could draft up that would be binding?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe the town has entered into any types of agreements like that, but the 120 days is a statutory requirement, and I don't know that the board would honor any sort of agreement that waives a statutory requirement for the town to make a decision within a time frame.
The second question is going to be about this, what was referred to as a conceptual site plan. Is that binding or is that enforceable? What's the effects, legal effects of that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the items that are in the conceptual drawing are not items that are before staff and will not be before council as part of the decision that is happening right now, but would happen later. So in terms of what is binding or not, I don't think if there was an appeal in the matter that the board would be compelled to follow any of those conceptual drawings.
I guess because the delegations have stated that they would provide a conceptual site plan right now, and they wouldn't give us a full-blown site plan application to somehow appease the request made by Ms. Townsend. Would that be acceptable by our staff at this point?
The conceptual site plan getting at this point in time would give us an understanding of what the building is. The only thing that would be binding would be the zoning application. And in the end, the entire application is still subject to site plan. So that coming in at the same time would maybe assist with the zoning review, but it would always be subject to site plan at the end of the day.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm not sure every member of the public may have followed the intricacies of that exchange. Who over here on this bench would like to turn that into plain speak? Madam Commissioner?
Mayor and members of council, the zoning application that is in at this point in time provides zoning which sets out yards and heights and other requirements of uses on the property. That is all that it does at this point in time. That's the only thing that the board is bound by if in fact the board ends up approving it. That's the dimensions of the property that's set out. That's the zoning that's council is considering at this point in time. The request is from Ms. Townsend was that they file a site plan application at the same time. The site plan, of course, goes into much detailed level in order that provides for a lot of the loading, the parking, those kinds of details on a site plan itself. We generally do not take those two applications in at the same time. We deal with the zoning application that sets out the yard requirements, and then we deal with the site plan application subsequent to that. That's the normal process that we proceed on, so that you do clearly have an understanding of what the zoning is before you move to the site plan. So that's the process we generally follow. Having a proposed or conceptual plan in at the time you deal with the zoning certainly helps understand the application. But you do have to keep in mind that that's conceptual application, does not define the application. The only thing that does at the end of the day is what is actually put into the zoning bylaw. So that's its yards, its parking requirements, its height, those limitations that are in effect codified into the bylaw itself. Does that assist council in?
I think council understood it. I was just wanting to make sure that the public understood it, that the application before us is for only one piece of a process of several steps. And just because we don't have a site plan application doesn't mean that if we don't get a site plan application with this, that doesn't mean anything about what's going to happen at site plan. Site plan is a separate process that's much stricter than this and much more detailed than this. So, So I guess the only other thing I'll add is, in our experience, we've found ways to shrink wrap things differently than by that strategy. And also, I guess, I'm not sure it's clear, but it looks to me like the appeal date for the zoning bylaw application is June 13th, right? No? What is the appeal? What are the appeal dates here?
I think at the beginning of the report, it identifies the application was complete on March the 1st.
No, February, doesn't it say February 13th?
No, it was submitted on February the 13th and deemed complete
Oh, I'm sorry,
on March the 1st.
deemed complete on March 1st.
And March the 1st, the deemed complete date would be the date you start to count the clock for the 120-day appeal.
So July 1st.
So July 1st.
Okay, sorry, thank you. So if no one else was helped by that, I was. So thank you. All right, so, and I would anticipate further that you would have no trouble bringing a recommendation report back before then. You were planning to, I presume. Is that correct? Madam Planning Director.
Thank you, through your worship. I think where's the wording? The notation from Ms. McPherson was no sooner than September the 9th. My only concern would be that if we are working in good faith towards a solution, towards a number of the issues and redesigning, we would not want to be bound by a September 9th date. So we will do our best to work towards bringing it back with full notice to those who are in attendance this evening and others who submit comments between now and that future date. But I would not want to be bound by a September 9th date.
September 9th is a totally arbitrary moment in time. I'm concerned about where this gets settled, at the board or at council. And it seems to me if the appeal rights begin on July 1st, and if council would like to make the decision, then we need a recommendation report before July 1st. Is that correct?
Yes, if the applicant wished, through your worship, to exercise its appeal rights, we would require to come to council for its decision by that date.
Right. So my further question is, if that were council's hope that you would report before then, would you be able to?
Given the extent of the issues and some of the outstanding legal matters, we would do our best, but given today's date and the next scheduled meeting, required date for reports for July, it would be very difficult at this point.
All right then. Councillor Khan.
Sorry, the mayor's comments clarified a few things, but it confused me on a few issues as well about this date. It seemed to me that we had to do something before 120 days were up. That was apparent. But you're taking the position that maybe September 9th might be more appropriate, or a later date. what's the prejudice to the town if we wait till September? I guess the clearest question is, I was under the understanding that if both sides consent to waive it or to adjourn an OMB date, that can be done. It seems to me that both sides want more time, and council is willing to give more time as long as there's no prejudice to the town.
I haven't actually heard both sides say they want more time. I've heard that one side wants time, the other side is willing to consider it as long as there's progress, I think was the way
Fair comment.
The nuance I heard there, and that's not the same thing as both asking for more time.
And further to your comment, Mr. Mayor, I think the answer that you heard from legal was that if all parties agreed, even at this point in time, to defer the application into September, the applicant can't give away their statutory rights to appeal. So they could still exercise that. The example you gave of the board is in the jurisdiction to be able to make a decision on whether or not they would allow a deferral of the hearing. So the two comparisons are not quite the same. So we would hope that we could collectively work in good faith in order to review the application. The applicant then would see no need to appeal it immediately if we're all continuing to work forward in order to get a report back to council as soon as is possible.
Okay. So, Ms. McPherson, do you have any extra wisdom to share with us on these points of concern?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think you summarized my point correctly. If we're moving forward, we understand that it takes some time to sort out these issues and the backup with the agendas and the reports. We would very much like a September date. What I was saying is my client has advised they have no intent of appealing before then, given the time it takes to write a final report and a recommendation report. The September date seems reasonable. Obviously, I had to throw in the proviso. We have to be making progress because after this meeting, all of a sudden, staff refused to talk to us and the condominiums refused to talk to us. Then we would sort of have an idea of where this was going in September, so there would be no point in waiting. However, assuming all things are going forward, as the planning director talked about, we have no intent of appealing before an opportunity to work with staff and everyone else and get a happy decision for everybody by September.
And are you authorized by the applicant to make those representations?
I hope so. The applicant is here, and if he wants to stand up and contradict me, but I did check with him when this suggestion had come up from Ms. Townsend, if we would wait till September, and I advised that seemed reasonable to me with my experience in Oakville in terms of the backup of getting things on agendas and scheduling.
If it would make me more comfortable to hear it from legal counsel as well, would Mr. Roscoe like to offer us that same representation?
I'm sure he would.
Welcome, Mr. Roscoe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
It's been a long time.
It has. Mr. Mayor, members of council, pleasure to be here tonight. Barry Horosco, lawyer with the law firm of Brady & Partners, and I was recently retained along with Ms. McPherson to act for the applicant. We've had a couple of discussions at the back here, and I can confirm to you that everything that Ms. McPherson said to you, the clients are committed to. I hate to stand here and start talking about the Ontario Municipal Board. Quite frankly, my clients have a commitment to try and work things out locally. The comments that were made by Ms. Townsend earlier tonight, we interpret as being positive. We see that as being an invitation to meet and try and work through some of the details of what's going on this. Otherwise, it's a complicated real estate site. There's no question about that, and it does need some meetings and needs some pretty sharp legal minds that both clients have working with them behind our teams to address and to work through. So you've got a commitment that if we're making progress, there's no intention whatsoever before, and we look forward to hopefully getting a report recommendation on September the 9th. But our plan here is to try and work things out and do the various consultations that are needed. Is that enough of a commitment to you, Mr. Mayor?
Well,
by the way, I also agree.
It's about an inch short. It's just a touch short.
I agree to you that I also agree with the comments that have been made to you by your staff, both planning commissioner and legal staff here, that we can't contract away our rights under the Planning Act. So no matter what I signed to you tonight, if the clients decided after the 120 days the appeal could be filed and the board would proceed in due course. But I can tell you as a matter of good faith, there's no intention to do that here. All
right. So I have another question for you. As you listen to and as you read the submissions and you listen to the submissions, would you find it rational and reasonable if I told you that it struck me that a lot of what animates these submissions is a lack of certainty about how this is going to play out? There's fear, uncertainty, and doubt about the impacts on the existing residents. Would you agree that that's
I would
a
agree.
fair?
Apprehension is part of the process and part of the reaction that people have.
And you heard already that really only the site plan application process provides final certainty as to what goes where and how much and so on, right?
I'm not really accustomed to being cross-examined. It's kind of fun. It's more fun being on the questioning end than the answering. I mean, I would put that maybe into different words. I think the site plan process does assist. And in fact, Ms. McPherson's comments to you also had received input from me that I think in this particular case, having a conceptual site plan to move forward with is certainly a very useful tool to be able to look at the details about how the site's going to function. We're going to have to do something similar to that in terms of dealing with our neighbors, addressing the shared facilities agreement and the operation of the easements that are on title. So if what you're trying to get me to say is, I think a site plan application is a precondition to moving forward on this application, I wouldn't agree to that. I think it would be useful for some more detail to be on the table, and I think the conceptual site plan is the way to go here.
So my
Is that your belief too, sir?
If I was to tell you that, would you find it reasonable if I was to tell you that my concern about a conceptual site plan is it doesn't bind anybody to anything and doesn't actually provide the certainty that I'm hearing people wanting to see? So let me ask the question a different way. If you don't like that, how could you give certainty to the community so that you could, I mean, because if you're going to be talking to them, you're basically going to be seeing site plan questions over and over again. These are really site plan questions.
I think perhaps if I explain my answer a little more fully than I did earlier, and maybe Ms. McPherson could assist me, to file a complete site plan application involves an awful lot of reports that are kind of unrelated to, I think, the issues that we need to address with the neighbors with respect to the zoning bylaw. For example, there's requirements for acoustical reports to be carried out. I don't think that's the issue that we've got here, but it really, to do those acoustical reports, is going to need some level of design detail so that the acoustical engineers can go out and model it. So if we commit to a site plan application process here today, that's going to take us another 4, 5, 6 months to put it together. I don't think that's really serving anyone's purpose, and that probably would trigger other forums for this to be dealt with, which I don't think are helpful whatsoever. In terms of trying to answer the detail, I'm going to invite Lori to join me on this, but I think that it would be useful for us to have like the site plan itself detailed enough, dimensioned enough that may go beyond what the zoning bylaw filing requirements were, but so that we really look at, someone raised an issue right now about parking spaces. Do they interfere with a driveway entrance coming in and out? That level of detail, I think, is one that we should, I think Lori would agree with me on that, but that's one that we should be tabling, and we should be getting out there and taking a look at how the flow of traffic is going to work. So I haven't thought it through fully, but I think more detail would be useful. But I don't think a full site plan submission requirement is
So are you
required.
describing, instead of a conceptual one, a partial one?
A partial one. I'd go that far.
All right. Thank you very much. Councillor Khan has a question for you.
Oh, by the way, I'm sorry, before you get that, I was asked by my clients to say that we are prepared to look at a series of options. One of the things that we are prepared to consider is a reduction in the amount of commercial that we have proposed to date. Whether that's a total elimination of it is a different question, but a reduction in it would be something that we would be prepared to look at. I'm sorry, I apologize.
Your Worship, this is probably inappropriate, but I've been known to do that before. With your indulgence, perhaps we can get Ms. Townsend to comment on this conceptual or partial site plan, what her position is.
Well, I believe it is actually inappropriate. It's our decision. And it's our comfort that I'm after here, because we have to make the decision ultimately.
No, I appreciate that, but she's the one that raised it, and just wondering whether or not her residence or her position has been swayed at all.
We can certainly call her back after we've exhausted the information we can get from this delegation. Any other questions for this delegation? Mr. Roscoe, good to see you again.
Thank you.
Ms. McPherson.
Thank you, members.
Thank you very much for your information. Ms. Townsend, Mr. Khan begs the pleasure of your company at the podium one more time.
Thank you very much, and I'll confine my comments to that question. This is, as Mr. Horosco indicated, a complex site, and I think you saw that through the photographs that were being shown by some of the residents that live there. With complex sites, it has been my experience that we partner up a site plan with a zoning. It doesn't have to be completed, but both applications run concurrently, so there's a filing fee paid, the site plan goes in. It doesn't have complete application requirements under the Planning Act. It gets started so that there's at least a process to try and tie down some of these things, something that an agreement can attach itself to if you come to some kind of a resolution. I'm not content with a conceptual site plan because it can change just like that. And you can't, and I have great respect for what this council can do in a zoning bylaw, but there are limitations under the Planning Act. And it's those limitations that I'm hearing from the community are going to be the drivers in a settlement in this. So at least from the ones that the people I represent.
So to sharpen the question, does a partial site plan application suit you better?
I'm not sure I know what a partial site plan is, but I think a site plan application would need to be filed. Let's get it started. I would say that it should get started. So there's a tool or a vehicle under the Planning Act that could be used as we advance the matter forward.
Okay. Thank you for that. Mr. Roscoe, do we all understand that the same way? Thank you, Ms. Townsend.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, this isn't maybe exactly what you want to hear. So I'll at least give you the response from my clients that we're prepared to prepare plans that will show height, density, massing, some of the traffic flow on the site. But we don't want to get caught into a situation where if we're going to run into a huge level of obstruction or obstacles from other interested parties here, that we've kind of gone into an expensive process. So we want to be helpful, but we don't want to stand here today and commit to a process that we don't think is necessary. So I'm going to leave it that no, we don't agree with the filing of a site plan, but we will prepare more detailed plans than what we've done. That's the message I've been asked to carry forward back to you.
Thank you very much for your information.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, council, this matter is confined to table. I'll look for a motion to receive the comments of the public on the file. Councillor Bird, it's your ward. All those in favor, opposed if any, and that does carry. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attendance tonight. I hope it's been helpful. I'm going to declare a brief 5-minute recess. Council can use it for a bio break, and that'll permit those of you who are not fascinated with the rest of our agenda to leave without disrupting us. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we now resume our meeting of Planning and Development Council. And our next public hearing item is number 4 on the agenda, the public meeting and recommendation report for the draft plan of condominium Fox Farm Developments. And if we turn our attention to Paul Barrett, and if the mic was quite weak when Mr. Charles was at it, so give it some force when you're talking to us so we can hear you. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. A draft plan of condominium application has been submitted to create a common element condominium which consists of a private road, concrete sidewalks, and 22 visitor parking spaces. The purpose of this presentation is to introduce the planning application in conjunction with a statutory public meeting and provide an overview of staff's recommendation. The report can be found on page 161 to 178 of tonight's agenda. The surrounding neighborhood consists of a park and residential uses to the south. Phase 2 of the subject development and St. Joseph's Portuguese Roman Catholic Church to the west, a dedicated school block to the north, and residential dwellings to the east. The applicant seeks approval of a common element condominium which consists of a private road, concrete sidewalks, and 22 visitor parking spaces related to Phase 1 of this development. Phase 1 received final site plan approval on July 16, 2012, and consists of 114 back-to-back townhouse units. Phase 2 is not part of this application. The Planning Services Department undertook a circulation of this application to ensure that all technical and financial matters have been satisfactorily addressed. Staff recommends approval of this application subject to the conditions in Appendix A as the following requirements have been satisfied. The proposed plan of condominium meets the criteria established in Section 5124 of the Planning Act. The proposed plan of condominium conforms to the Livable Oakville official plan and complies with the zoning bylaw. The development has been granted final site plan approval where site servicing, grading, stormwater management, landscaping, urban design, and financial obligations were addressed through the conditions of site plan approval. The application provides for shared ownership and maintenance of the internal site service and amenity elements and is appropriate for the orderly development of the lands. In conclusion, Your Worship, staff put forth the following recommendation as shown for Council's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barrett. Councillor Elgar.
Your Worship, since this has already been through the OMB ringer, and if there's no one here to speak to it, I would move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any members of the public with information for Council on this file? Council, it's been moved by Councillor Elgar. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Councillor Elgar, that carries. All right, that brings us, Council, to our discussion items. The notices of intention to demolish on Lower Baseline and on Howard, the North Oakville Trails Plan, and the Economic Development Annual Report, and our confidential discussion item. I wonder if there's any, is there any discussion wanted for 5 and 6 and C1? And if there isn't, Councillor Bird? Okay. What about 5 and 6? Councillor Giddings?
If there's no one here to speak about it, I'd be happy to move those.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public here with information for Council on items 5 and 6? Councillor Giddings has moved 5 and 6. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Those are carried. That brings us to number 7, the North Oakville Trails Plan. And we have a report. Chris Mark. And as I understand it, Councillor Elgar has some questions. So, Mr. Mark?
Good evening.
Councillor Elgar, I should note, we have a registered delegation on this item.
Good evening, Mayor Burton and members of Council. It's my pleasure to bring forward this evening the updated North Oakville Trails Plan. As I'm representing the Parks and Open Space Department here this evening, I just want to let Council know that the work that's gone into this plan over the last number of months has really been a corporate initiative. Members of the Development Engineering Department, the Planning Department, our Engineering and Construction Department, our Corporate Communications Department, all have lent a hand in terms of developing the updated North Oakville Trails Plan that's in your report and what I'm going to be showing you this evening. Just to provide a little bit of background, since it has been a little bit of time since we've been before Council with the North Oakville Trails Plan. Originally, on November 24th of 2011, we did provide a report to PD Council at that time. There was significant concerns brought forward at that time, and Council referred the North Oakville Trails Plan to a Trails Subcommittee. That Trails Subcommittee did meet between December of 2011 and February of 2012. Terms of reference were established, and as well, the subcommittee received several delegations throughout that process. Through the subcommittee process, there was trail types that were defined. A major trail or a type A trail would be 2.1 meters to 2.4 meters in width, be limestone screening, be a passive trail, and be for seasonal use only, not be part of the active transportation management plan. And then we had minor trails, which would be type B trails, as discussed to the subcommittee. These would be a meter wide to 1.5 meters, limestone screening, wood chips. They could be compacted surfaces just on the ground itself. And as well, these minor trails would be subject to further development. So April 10th of 2012 was the last report that we had before Planning and Development Council on the North Oakville Trails Plan. At that meeting, we did summarize the recommendations coming out of the Council Subcommittee on North Oakville Trails. And Council provided staff direction at that time, which included that we would report back to a future P&D meeting on the revised North Oakville East Trails Plan, as we are here this evening. But we also, Council also directed staff to reflect on the subcommittee's vision of the first priority being the protection and the enhancement of the natural heritage system. Further, that staff consider no trails through any core areas of the NHS in consultation with Conservation Halton. The Conservation Halton be consulted throughout the EIR stage and process, and as well that staff be requested to provide a general sense of the number of the B-type trails in the natural heritage system and the process for their creation. So just as a bit of a background, it's been a year since we've been before Council, we have a hierarchy of trails within the North Oakville Trails Plan. We have multi-use trails, and these are paved trails that are minimum of 3 meters in width, and they're typically asphalt. These trails that are asphalt and 3 meters wide would be located within municipal rights-of-way, essentially the boulevards, as well as within community parks within North Oakville. These multi-use trails do form part of the approved active transportation management plan. However, they will not be located within the natural heritage system. Major trails, which we refer to as Type A trails through the subcommittee process. These trails are passive and seasonal use only with no winter maintenance. They wouldn't be lit, and they're not considered part of the active transportation plan. In many ways, they'd be similar to the trails that have been constructed south of Dundas, generally located on the fringe of the natural heritage system. They'd be soft surface, being limestone screenings. Only where necessary, a boardwalk or bridge or a hard surface would be required. The width of the trails would be 2.1 meters to 2.4 meters. And the final location and design details would be subject to an EIR FSS process, which is the Environmental Implementation Report and the Functional Servicing Study, as well as detailed plan development. And these major trails would be accessible where possible. Minor trails or B-type trails, again, passive and pedestrian, nature-based use only, seasonal usage, not part of the ATMP. They generally be located within the NHS, be soft surfaced, could be wood chipped or just a naturally compacted ground. These trails would be quite narrow. They would only be 1 meter to 1.5 meters wide with limited accessibility, and we would have to put appropriate signage regarding the accessibility. And these trails would be subject to future planning, design, and implementation. As part of the council direction we did receive back in April of 2012, council asked us to give some thought to these minor or type B trails in terms of the future installation of them. Staff believe these minor trails, with the exception of one trail that I'll be showing you on a slide in a couple of minutes, these trails will really develop post-development. They'll really be facilitated by pedestrian traffic patterns. It means that as people move into North Oakville, they begin to use the trail system. It's likely that these minor trails will start to develop simply based on pedestrian traffic patterns. Our first efforts in terms of these minor trails that will be developing would be mitigation versus going in and immediately putting in the trail installation. That means we might be doing some signage, we might be doing some planting to try and keep people on the major trail and not go off into one of the minor trails. So the first instance that we would take in terms of seeing one of these minor trails develop would be mitigation. We would look to have the same level of environmental consideration given to these minor trails as we would to a major trail, meaning that if the minor trail is developing through an area that is bird habitat or a wetland, we would certainly look at that as the environmental consideration in terms of not moving forward with that minor trail. And in terms of the process for doing these and installing these trails at a later date, we would suggest that we would undertake that through a public process. Typically it would be a neighborhood issue, and we would do the normal 120-meter circulation when we have a neighborhood issue and we want to bring it forward to the community as a trail augmentation. So what have we been doing since April of 2012 to update the plan? We've merged the two existing plans. We had a North Oakville East Trails plan, and we also had a companion North Oakville cycling document. In order to have the trails plan and the cycling plan function in a coordinated manner, we felt it was appropriate to merge the two existing plans because they really can't operate in isolation of each other. So we merged the plans together so there's one document for a trails and cycling plan for North Oakville. We expanded the study area to include the west secondary plan. Back originally when Council gave approval in principle to the North Oakville Trails Plan, the West Secondary Plan did not have any approval. However, we did know that at some point in time we would be moving forward with trails in the West Secondary Plan. That plan is now approved, so on the work we've done over the last 10 to 12 months, we've also included the West Secondary Plan and the trails therein. We engaged the firm of Natural Resource Solutions, Inc., or NRSI, to review all the mapping and the trail locations. NRSI is a firm who has done a lot of work here with us in Oakville. They are really experts in terms of the subwatershed study and the North Oakville Creeks and Streams study. So we really relied on their expertise to review all of the mapping and making sure we're looking at the trails being in the correct environmentally sensitive location. We've updated trails cross sections to reflect the new trail design that the subcommittee and council approved. We undertook an extensive public consultation process as well. We wanted to make sure that what we were doing was hitting the mark in terms of the discussion that was had at the subcommittee level. We've also updated the EIR FSS with a more enhanced and defined discussion on trails, including field surveys and data submission requirements. We consulted with Halton Conservation staff throughout the entire process. We've also developed a trail construction and a natural area specification document. As much as all the planning and the attention to detail we want to provide to the trails through the EIR FSS improved process, we need to build it right. And building it right means that we have a natural area specification that we can issue to contractors when they're building trails, that they're building these trails based on this criteria and these specifications. And of course, presenting this new trails plan to council, which is what we're doing this evening. So in terms of looking at the trails, in terms of the location, the siting of the trails, we really went back to square one and had a look at exactly North Oakville in terms of the constraint mapping. With the work of staff and the consultant, we reviewed all the areas of constraints, if you will, within East Oakville and North Oakville. We looked at areas where wetlands were, where open country habitat is, where bird migration areas are, where forest areas are. We wanted to make sure that when we were siting these trails and planning these trails, we weren't compromising any of the constraints or natural features or areas of significance within North Oakville. So we did that for the East plan, and as well we did it for the West plan. So we went, I think, quite meticulously through East and West Oakville, throughout North Oakville, to look at where the areas of constraint are and make sure that our trail system was not compromising any of those environmental features. So there before you on the screen, on this slide, is the North Oakville East Trails Plan. It represents a combination of major trails, which as you can see are around the perimeter of the Natural Heritage System. It also includes the cycling system for on-road as well as regional bike facilities. And it's important to note that several cycling network changes had to be done throughout this process. That as a subcommittee recommended no hard surface trails through the Natural Heritage System, the ATMP cycling network needed to be revisited. So that's why it was really important that we took the cycling plan and the trails plan and merged them as one document, because they both rely on each other. The east, west, and north-south on-road cycling opportunities were reviewed and supplemented to look at missing links in the network. And this resulted in a more recommended more on-road facilities along the proposed road system within North Oakville. There is only one minor trail or B-type trail that we've identified at this time, and that is just to the east of Nagawa Boulevard. That trail that goes through Core 5, which is part of the Natural Heritage System. That is the only minor or B-type trail that we've identified that we need to install at this time. So we've really made a really conscientious effort to make sure that the trails are located at the fringe of the buffer of the natural heritage system, and it's well connected with an on-road cycling system, so that hopefully these bee trails will not develop. But we do feel that that one there that's indicated on the plan this evening is one that we know will be there, as it is a connection between neighborhoods. And that is an example of the North Oakville Trails West Plan, again showing the trails, the major trails around the edges of the natural heritage system, the regional cycling facilities, and as well we took the opportunity at this time to work with Conservation Halton and actually map out the trails that are planned for the Glenorchy Conservation Area. Again, so we're making sure that we're providing as much connectivity as possible throughout the entire trails plan in North Oakville. So one of the areas that we've looked at quite extensively over the last number of months, and it really speaks to the, I think, to the issue that the subcommittee and council brought forward as part of the North Oakville Trails subcommittee, was looking at greater detail for an enhanced detail in terms of the EIR FSS process. So in terms of the EIR FSS process, right now, prior to this update, trails were mentioned in the document, but not really to the degree that we need to, in terms of committing to what council's looking for in terms of the preservation of the natural heritage system. So when trails, so this is actually, 3.71 is actually a clause, or if you will, a piece read out of the new EIR FSS document. So for trails that are going to be exclusively in buffer areas that are active agricultural fields at the time of the study, the applicants need to do a species at risk screening with appropriate seasonal field surveys as necessary. They need to do a review of a species list from the North Oakville Creeks and Stream System. Species have changed since it was actually first approved, I think back in 2007. So that's an issue that needs to be looked at on an ongoing basis. And as well, hazard trees within striking distance of the trail need to be identified and felled as part of the trail construction and left in the buffer as a habitat. For trails that are going to be within natural areas or crossing of streams, again, if that is the case, and that is part of the trails plan that's coming forward as part of a development application, again, review all the noxious species, we're going to require a mapping of all the vegetation communities. A species at risk screening is going to be required. Significant wildlife habitat screening is also going to be required as part of this process. We've looked at bridge guidelines. I'd mentioned that we have high constraint and medium constraint stream crossings as part of the constraints. We've developed guidelines for the bridges and the requirements therein for crossing red and blue streams, red being high constraint, blue being medium constraint. And as well, red side dace. Back when the original North Oakville Trails Plan was developed, red side dace, there was no real guidelines at that time. Now there is. So when trail development occurs in the buffer of a red side dace corridor, there is specific requirements for that. As well, hydraulic impacts have to be assessed in terms of the trail development. We spoke a lot about drainage and impacts of drainage through the trails through the subcommittee process. So that's going to be looked at for any culvert that's going to be installed. Again, inventorying all the trees to make sure that we have a good analysis of the trees that are there and understanding of the integrity of those trees, the species of those trees. As well, these need to be assessed by a certified arborist. Again, speaking to more facts and more specifics in terms of the detail which these trails are going to be looked at through the EIR process. And as well, so there is significant flora and fauna and wildlife habitat that's out there in the natural heritage system. We want to retain that, but again, we want to retain that and have that appear on any plans that are going to be developed so they're not destroyed during trail construction. And lastly, trail siting. We can do all the planning and all the studies and everything we need to do in terms of making sure that we're siting, we're doing the analysis for the trail so it's environmentally sensitive. But then we need to site the trail. The final trail and the siting location is actually going to be done in the field with Conservation Halton and town staff. All natural features that factor into the final layout are to be surveyed and appear on a plan. The final field fit would be informed by the ecological land classification system and required field surveys for wildlife. And we're also going to be staking the trail center line. Any new drainage should be designed with the purpose of protecting and maintaining and augmenting the natural hydraulic regime of the NHS. And all grading associated with any trails has to be shown on a plan. As I mentioned, we can plan for the best trails possible based on all the natural environmental issues. However, we need to construct trails properly and sensitively. So we have looked at that in quite a bit of detail. We've come up with a construction specification document that will be used in the construction of trails in North Oakville. It includes a host of issues that need to be addressed throughout the trail construction, such as site examination, erosion control, tree protection, materials, equipment. We want to make sure the equipment that's being used is not any wider than the trail that is actually being constructed. Layout inspection, restoration, and monitoring. These are all issues that bring greater control, greater monitoring, and I think a much better product at the end of the day when we do build these trails in North Oakville. Again, I think this is exactly what the subcommittee heard through the public delegation process when the subcommittee met. And again, this document of trails construction in natural areas, we feel goes a long way to supporting exactly what the delegations are concerned about. We also did a public consultation process as part of our review. We had many thoughtful and articulate delegations that came to speak before the subcommittee. One in particular was Dr. Pedro Pereira. He's a local botanist, has significant knowledge of the natural heritage system, particularly Core 5. So we thought it was quite important that we follow up with Dr. Pereira, keep him in the loop, and in fact, we used him in many respects to do some ground truthing because he has so much knowledge and experience out there in the natural heritage system after 20 years of working within the NHS. Invited stakeholder focus group to review the updated mapping and recommended changes. Again, through the subcommittee process, we heard lots of ideas and lots of concerns raised by the stakeholders. So we had a focus group and invited everybody who delegated to the subcommittee to come in, go over the mapping with us, give us their thoughts. Are we close? Are we hitting the mark? Is this exactly where you thought we'd be in terms of our trail siting and trail design when you delegated to the subcommittee? So we did that in September of 2012. We also had a public meeting in October of 2012 to check in, and we invited everybody within North Oakville and a good distance south of Dundas. As well, we made a presentation to the Accessibility Advisory Committee to receive their feedback on the plans for the North Oakville Trail System. We had an invited speaker, as I call it. Bill Goulding is a gentleman who owns a company called Sustainable Trails, Inc. He is one of the foremost people who construct trails in natural environments all over North America and in fact all over the world. He came initially to speak with Mayor Burton, Liz Bennion from Oakville Green, and myself, and quite impressed with his presentation. So we invited him actually to come to and speak to our entire committee of staff and Conservation Halton, so we could essentially pick his brain and learn his best management practices in terms of trail development. So we spent a bit of time with him. And of course, as part of the public consultation process, we're here this evening providing this updated plan to Council. So Mayor Burton and members of Council, through this updated trails plan and revisions and enhancements that are contained within, staff believes that the trails plan demonstrates and articulates Council's vision of the first priority in the protection and the enhancement of the natural heritage system. And with that, we have recommendations for you this evening that the joint staff report on the North Oakville Trails be received, and as well that this North Oakville Trails plan be adopted as a guiding document for all trail development within North Oakville.
Thank you, Mr. Mark. Councillor Elder.
Yeah, thank you very much through you, your mayor, and a big thank you to Chris Mark and his staff, and also to other departments, Darnell and his staff also. A lot of work has been done. I just have a few minor housekeeping issues, which I hope we can, everyone agrees to tonight, and we can get this cleaned up and get it approved. And when I look at the document, there's we talk about the multi-use trails, and we have a definition. And I notice on about 4 of the maps in the actual North Oakville Trails plan, they're not called multi-use trails, it's multi-use paths. And I'm just wondering if we can make that change going tonight, or that you will clean it up before it goes out.
Through you, Mayor Burton, yes, we did notice those inconsistencies, and we would clean up that document and keep it consistent throughout, Councillor Elgar.
Okay, thank you. And tonight in your presentation, you talked about major trails, and they would be 2.1 to 2.4 meters. There's a few places in the actual trail plan where the size is a little bit different. And I'm wondering, would you get those changed also, so it's the range of 2.1 to 2.4?
Yes, we will.
Okay, and the same thing for the minor, where in your presentation it was 1 and 1.5. There are places in the plan where it's 1.2 to 1.8, so we could change that also to 1 and 1.5?
Yes.
Okay, I really appreciate that. Now, there's one other one, which I think, I'm just afraid, this council is here today, but in 10 years' time, a developer might read something and see it differently. If we look on page 230 of the report, the schematic, and I think if we could just maybe change the wording, because I think I did hear you say there would be absolutely no multi-use trails in the NHS. And at the very bottom of the schematic on page 230, you'll notice it mentions setback to the natural heritage system. And I think that means setback to the road right-of-way.
Yes.
So if we could have those modifications done also.
Yes, we will clean that up as well, yes.
Okay, that's actually everything I've noticed and we've seen in the report. And I think with that, you've done an excellent job, and I'd be pleased to move it at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Councillor Elgar. Councillor Robinson?
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Mark. Every time I get a chance, I talk about the Mayor's Advisory Committee on Natural Trail Standards. And from time to time, we hear you tell us that you have used portions of it and made reference to certain pieces of the content of that document. It took us 6 months to create. Now, we very much appreciate that you've referenced that use again in this particular report. It's on page 220. And you go on to say that this North Oakville Trails Plan has referenced the MAG document and have included some of its design principles and recommendations. Without putting you in too much of a spot, Chris, could you tell us which you did accept from that MAG document in this?
I would say through you, Mr. Chairman, to Councillor Robinson, I think a great deal of the MAG was concerned about trails being very sensitive and to the natural environment. It speaks to planning of the trail and whether a trail is even needed at all. I think we capture the essence of the MAG document through all the work we put into the pre-planning through the EIR process. So I think in terms of sensitivity and being conscious of the MAG's concerns about sensitivity, I think we've covered that off. The MAG speaks about things like being cognizant of the natural environment, such as drainage. We have been very cognizant of that through the EIR process that we're going to be following in terms of how trails are going to be planned. The MAG document speaks specifically as well about public consultation. We've taken that to heart throughout the process to date in terms of having public consultation, I think significant consultation in terms of the planning to bring this forward to you this evening at Council. We've indicated through my presentation that when B-type trails are appearing and may be required, we would undertake a public consultation process at that time through our normal 120-meter radius of a neighborhood. So I think again we've captured that whole section on communications and consultations that the MAG discusses. I think we've really embodied that within the presentation this evening and within our whole thought process going forward. So I think we have paid great attention to the MAG and actually been very helpful in our thought process in bringing this and delivering this tonight to Council.
Thank you very much. We haven't persuaded you yet to adopt the WID standards, but maybe that will happen. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Demoff?
Just a quick question, and I don't know which Chris will answer this, but I think I know the answer. But the reason these are signed bike routes as opposed to on-road bike lanes had to do with, maybe you can just go through that, could you?
I think that might be something that Mr. Clapham could answer.
Through you, Mayor, most of the routes that we added within North Oakville include on-road signed bike routes, so just adding a green sign in this instance to help the cyclist either traverse east and west or north-south. There may be an opportunity to include sharrows. However, the right-of-way constraints that we have with regards to the different levels of road classifications within North Oakville really restrict the amount of on-road dedicated cycling lanes that we can use.
And that was due to an OMB settlement, was it not? I seem to recall when I asked why we couldn't just do it right when we had the opportunity, it was because the roads were too narrow.
Through you.
I know that's not your department.
Absolutely not. But through you, Mayor, as you can see my enthusiasm this evening. Yes, through the North Oakville secondary plans, those were determined and approved.
Thank you.
Councillor Adams, any others? Councillor Adams.
I just have a quick question for you about the amount of, I guess it's called the high slope paving requirement areas for the major trails. And as I look at the maps which you had on the screen, but it's on 226, 227 really for the northeast area. And I do note that for all the crossings of any of the NHS lands, they're all basically at the narrowest possible point. You've worked to try and find areas that are going to minimize the amount of crossing space required. So I think that's great. But I wondered if you had a sense of how much of those crossing areas would be high slope areas and how much is relatively flat. It's hard to know without a topographical map.
Through you, Mayor Burton, that is something difficult to say at this time. We don't think there's going to be a lot of it, to be honest. It is fairly flat throughout most of North Oakville. I think as it is today, we only really hard surface an area where it's required for erosion and stabilization. So I think we would look at that through the detailed planning. In fact, as these trails are coming forward through the EIR process, we would be looking at if there's a need for hard surfacing a trail. I think we'd be identified through that process. That would have the ability of people like Conservation Halton commenting on it. And I think if it does get hard surfaced at the end of the day, because it is a significant grade and there is a problem with health and safety and corporate liability, that would be known at the outset. So I think that's probably the best answer I can give you.
And the treatment would be sort of consistent with what we see, for example, on the South Morrison Creek trail system behind Town Hall here, where we have small amounts of hard surface as you go down into the valley, and then once you're in the valley, it's soft surface.
That's correct.
That's what's in.
That is exactly what we'd be looking at doing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Any others? Madam Clerk, would you call the delegation?
We have Karen Brock from Oakville Green.
Welcome, Ms. Brock. Council looks forward to your information.
It's a whole lot cooler now that we cleared the rest of the crowd out of here. I did stay for the exciting part of the meeting, which is the Trails meeting. As the president of Oakville Green, I did want to express my appreciation to Mayor Burton and to the council for allowing a subcommittee to form and take in a lot of information. I think a lot of good information showed up through the mayor's advisory group, not just Oakville Green, but many other groups and other consultants and interested parties. So I think that was really worthwhile. I did want to just point out a couple of the technicalities that I believe Alan Elgar alluded to regarding the on page 20 and 22 of the Appendix A, where it references the minor trails being either 1.2 and 1.8 meters. So just if that could be clarified. Also in Appendix C, in the terms of reference on page 29, there's a reference made to the minor trails being 1 to 2 meters wide. So heaven forbid we don't want that to happen. So again, just for clarity going forward, I'd like to see that corrected. We're forging new territory. It's exciting to see how many residents will be backing on not just a green space, but a natural heritage system. And Oakville Green has been considering ways of trying to get to these new neighborhoods to share with them how their natural heritage system is unique and ways that they can help to make it even better. Also, we are dealing with a situation where the trails will be built. I'm delighted, of course, to see that there are guidelines for the building through natural trails. So, of course, that was a surprise to me, and that is great because I think that just sort of, again, tightens the screws a little bit tighter so that things are going to happen the way we want them to happen. I guess once the trails are built, well, actually, first question, who's building the trails? And I guess it sounds a little bit negative, but I'm wondering what recourse the town could have if they do find that, oops, these trails are not being built according to the specifications here. I also wanted to just refer to Woodland Trails, which is the first development which was built at Neagawa and Dundas. And I think in one of the subcommittee meetings, we did mention that a trail was sort of accidentally sort of bulldozed through a thicket that was not approved, I guess, through an EIR, through Conservation Halton. Also, going north to south, just behind that development, there is a trail. That is basically a gravel trail through, connected to a valley. And I believe it is a mid-constraint, a medium-constraint valley corridor. And the plantings were sort of park-like in nature, so sod and beds and so on. So I guess that leads to my next question, and maybe a recommendation, things to think about next, is once the trails are in, who's going to be planting them and how are they going to be planted? Partly because I know nature is opportunistic. We know with the glossy buckthorn and the garlic mustard, as soon as the soil is disturbed, boom, it's growing there. So I'd like to sort of look at recommending an intensive planting of these natural heritage areas that may not be a wood lot. And not to say that we have to plant a tree on everything, because as we know, there are also some areas that need to be for open meadows for woodland birds. So in that case, maybe appropriate grasses or something. So even though we're working in conjunction with Conservation Halton, again, just sort of trying to align the timing so that with the building of the trail and the intense planting there, that we're sort of going to try and crowd out those opportunistic plants that we know are invasive. So I just wanted to leave that with you and see if any thought has been given to creating some guidelines for that.
Thank you very much. I'll just turn to Mr. Mark.
Through you, Mayor Burton. The trails in North Oakville will be, by and large, built by the development community based on the standards and the specifications that are put forward by the town. That is the best way to build the trails in terms of getting the trails in at the time of development. However, it will be based on the town standards and town monitoring. To speak to Ms. Brock's issue about planting, within the trail specification document, we did reference a section called restoration and monitoring. That will be happening. There will be restoration plans that will be, again, through the EIR process and the detailed design process. That will all be brought forward as that trail comes forward through the various approval processes of the EIR. So we will be paying close attention to things like trying to minimize the disturbance, planting immediately after the trail goes in, so we're not having this trail suddenly become a haven for garlic mustard and buckthorn. The Conservation Authority does have quite specific planting densities that we would have to be following. So I really think we've come full circle in terms of I know we've come full circle in terms of the way the trail was initially constructed up in Core 5 to what we're presenting with Council here today. I really believe we've come 270 to 360 degrees around in terms of looking at the philosophy of how we build trails, how we construct, and how we're going to monitor these trails going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mark. Any questions for the delegation? Ms. Brock, thank you very much for your information.
Thank you, and good work. I didn't mean to didn't want my last note to be sounding critical. I think there's some wonderful things that came out of it, so very appreciative.
Thank you very much. Council, just before we vote on this, I'd like to say on behalf of all of you that I think this is an amazing plan, and I get the greatest pleasure from being the mayor of a council that with this work proves yet again your dedication to listening to and being inspired by our amazing residents and all the knowledge and vision that they bring to our affairs. So with that, I'll call the vote. Councillor Elgar has moved it. All those in...
With the modification.
Of course.
Yeah.
We have a bylaw that provides for that in any event, but all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries, and thank you, everybody, for that. Now, with a great deal of pleasure, Council, I urge you to turn your attention to the presentation from our Economic Development Department, and our director is Dorothy St. George.
Good evening, Mayor Burton, members of council. It's my pleasure to present the Economic Development Annual Report for 2012. And as you may recall, the report was received by council in March, but due to the length of the meeting that evening, the presentation was delayed. So tonight, you're getting the presentation, and I've added in some additional information just to keep it interesting. I do think you'll agree that the report is brimming with lots of good news, and I have lots of pictures to share to help tell that story. And I'll start by giving you some context for the report. We first compiled the report for 2010 data in a very basic format. And after presenting that to council, we found that the report was also very useful in responding to business requests. So we decided to design the report to use it more as a marketing tool, and we gave some messaging to it, put in some photos, and it is now our most requested document. It is also, the 2011 report also achieved recognition with a silver award from the International Economic Development Council. In July, I'll provide council with an update regarding the town's economic development strategy and our various initiatives designed to promote business retention, expansion, and attraction. But tonight my presentation will cover 2012 development, company highlights, our competitive position relative to 25 municipalities, and a glimpse of 2013 activity. In 2011, the theme of the annual report was office development. And in that year, Oakville saw over 1 million square feet of new commercial development. In 2012, those commercial developments were being completed and starting to be occupied. So the theme of this report in 2012 is new spaces and new faces, reflecting the new companies that are arriving and expanding in Oakville, as well as new employees and residents to our community. 2012 was another strong year with over 540,000 square feet of commercial development and over 1,200 new jobs. This chart provides a listing of those new jobs in 2012. And of course, there will be others that we haven't captured here, small companies expanding or contracting. The good news is that not only are we attracting new companies, but many of our existing companies are expanding, both in terms of employees and facility size. 2012 was an exciting year in which plans were realized and others took root. And I'm going to show you a few pictures that document the changing landscape in Oakville. The first in front of you is the skeleton that was being erected for the first golf development on Davis Road. And this is how the building looked at the end of 2012. The lead tenant is PricewaterhouseCoopers, whose 400 to 500 employees will occupy the 75,000 square feet of the 150,000 square foot building. Another development along the South Service Road west of 3rd Line is the site of the new Porsche dealership. That was then, and this is the construction well underway. The old Polywheel site on the North Service Road across from the Ford plant is the home of the Joshua Creek Corporate Center. And in this photo, the buildings were under construction, and now the 3 flex office buildings are ready for occupancy. Here's a quick look at Oakville's top 10 private sector employers. Companies of this caliber attract like companies to Oakville, further adding to the town's strong, diversified economic base. And that economic base helps to weather fluctuations in the global economy and maintain a stable local economy. The annual report contains some top business stories for 2012 in Oakville. The largest development is the new Canadian head office for Siemens Canada. Siemens celebrated 100 years in Canada with the grand opening of its new office in Oakville that was developed by First Gulf. The development was completed in 2012 and 800 employees have now moved in. Another good news story was Ford's addition of a third shift at its Oakville assembly plant, adding 300 jobs. The expansion of its workforce signaled the growing demand for vehicles produced from this plant. And on January 4th of this year, Prime Minister Harper visited the plant to announce $250 million in federal funding for the Automotive Innovation Fund, which is designed to stimulate research and innovation in the auto sector. This is the inside of the PwC building. It shows it under construction. The groundbreaking ceremony was held in the spring of last year, and occupancy is scheduled for September of this year. Goodrich Landing Gear, you're all familiar with that company, was acquired by UTC Aerospace Systems in 2012. That change resulted in the creation of 60 new jobs at the plant and $7 million in new facility and equipment investments. This photo is from the grand opening of the Delaga Landon office in the Great Lakes Business Park. The company was previously located on the North Service Road, and as they expanded, they went looking for space in the area. We're very pleased that their final decision was to remain in Oakville with what might be the start of a financial services cluster alongside Canadian Tire Financial Services. So now I'm going to highlight some numbers. And you've got two numbers on two tables highlighted in yellow. The table shows the construction value and square footage of building permits issued in 2012. So the two numbers highlighted reflect the commercial development of $70 million in new construction on the top table and almost $32 million in alterations improvements on the bottom table for a total of over $100 million. You might also note the high value of the new institutional construction, which is the start of the permits for the hospital construction. So this graph shows the trend over the last 7 years, and you'll notice under 2012 that $100 million is reflected as the total for the commercial building permit activity in that year. So a couple things to note about this trend. The 2012 figure is right at the 7-year average for commercial activity. And while the 2011 number looks quite a bit higher, it included the $43 million cost of the GO Transit parking garage. So that was a substantial proportion of the 2011 activity. This is the 7-year activity chart for industrial development. The spike in 2007 was the development at Winston Park. And in 2010, the major driver was the construction of the Oakville Transit facility. So aside from that development, the industrial activity is fairly consistent, but fairly low from 2008 to 2012. So the previous two graphs identify construction value for non-residential development, and this graph details square footage. So commercial development is characterized by the peaks and valleys of office development. 2007, as I mentioned, was Winston Park. And 2011 included developments by First Gulf, Paul's Properties, and Carterra. We expect the next couple of years to be slower as that current inventory of new office space is filled. Oakville's ability to attract new non-residential investment is an important factor in the town's economic sustainability. Land values, development charges, and taxes are the three major costs that investors consider in site selection analysis. So I'm going to outline Oakville's position relative to other municipalities. This bar graph shows the land values for vacant employment land across the GTA. You start at the top in the east, go down through Toronto, and Oakville is down at the bottom with other Halton municipalities. Oakville's position with an average sale price of $627,000 per acre is a little above the GTA average of $595 for 2012. But overall, the Oakville market still represents good value relative to other municipalities. The next competitive factor is property tax rates. Industrial rates are shown in red, commercial in blue. Oakville's industrial tax rate was in the middle of the range for the GTA municipalities. And its commercial tax rate, the sixth lowest across the GTA, is quite competitive, contributing to Oakville's ability to attract office development. The third competitive factor is development charges, and this chart shows the 2012 DC rates across the GTA, and you'll note that Oakville's rate was the same for commercial or industrial, whereas some municipalities split that non-residential charge into commercial and industrial. Now you're all aware that Oakville passed the new DC bylaw in 2013, so how does that fit into this chart? So if you see the yellow dot is where Oakville's DC rate is now sitting for non-residential, non-retail development charges. The blue dot shows the retail rate. Now we don't have any changes that are made to other municipalities, but you can see where we're now falling into still a fairly competitive rate on the non-res, non-retail. We don't know what the impact will be yet of that new retail rate. I'm going to turn to some of the economic development initiatives in 2012. We held a business leaders forum for the top 25 employers in conjunction with the Chamber of Commerce Business Leaders reception. This allowed us to gain insight focused on retaining business and jobs in Oakville and attracting new investment that is aligned with the town's economic goals. Based on the feedback from the event, we developed an action plan that is currently being implemented, including the development of a marketing strategy, sector-based events, and investigation of a job board. Mayor Burton provided an overview of the 2012 China Trade Mission at a previous council meeting, so I won't go into detail, but I can tell you that follow-up is in progress with city representatives, and next week we will be hosting a return visit from the city of Hoi An, where we visited in December. As well, we are following up on investment inquiries, and the Mississauga Chinese Business Association has approached Oakville to form a business association, a Chinese business association for Oakville, given the interest in two-way investment. Economic development staff led a consultation process with the business community in Bronte that resulted in an action plan for improving the business environment in that area. The plan was given an award at the recent EDCO conference. And staff in various town departments have an understanding of the plan and how they can assist in its implementation as we move forward. With respect to business assistance, our department handled close to 300 inquiries in 2012, and these pie graphs denote the type and source of these inquiries. And you can see in that top pie chart that new investment and available sites inquiries accounted for almost half of the inquiries, which indicates considerable interest in Oakville. Our staff were involved in corporate calls to existing businesses in Oakville last year, and these are just some of the feedback that we received through that corporate calling program. With respect to common trends, more and more companies are conducting employee mapping to analyze the commute of their workforce. And this is a big advantage for Oakville, as we are often appearing in the geographic center of these maps. Existing GTA professional service companies are examining their structure and moving towards office consolidation. The site selection is often driven by this employee mapping, and we saw that with Siemens, Canadian Tire Financial Services, as well as PwC. With respect to what's working, the quality of life continues to be a major selling feature for these companies. We hear about it locally, regionally, and even internationally. We've been receiving good feedback on departmental initiatives, and companies really like the ability to connect with other companies in the community, because that sometimes they find synergies within the work that they are doing, and at other times it sparks interest in new development. Room for improvement. I think it's probably not uncommon in any municipality that there's frustration with the time it takes to get development approvals, but there has certainly been recognition with our development community that the town has undertaken steps to improve the process. So we are hearing that feedback, and that's a good thing. Some companies have felt that Oakville should be more proactive in its approach to business. Otherwise, the town risks losing valuable investment. We have learned a lot from companies through our business forum, through the corporate calling, particularly with respect to the target markets. And I will be providing more of that information back to you as we come forward with our economic development strategy update in July. On last year's presentation, Councillor, I messed up here. There we go. See if we can find out where. Okay, we're almost done. There we go. Okay, we'll do it another way. That's right. Here we go, lead generation. And at the last year's presentation, Councillor Elgar asked about what the department is doing to attract companies. So our approach has been reactive. We've really been relying on the provincial government, the federal government, who are operating around the world to bring in investment leads. Halton Region is involved in investment attraction, as is the Greater Toronto Marketing Alliance. So our approach to date has been to rely on those leads to come in, and we can service them. Once they come to the area, we can provide all the information they need about investing in Oakville. This chart shows the leads for 2012, and you can see that the overall numbers are very low. Both Halton Region and GTMA are seeking to expand their role in the area of investment attraction. Now, in developing a marketing plan for Oakville, we are meeting with these other organizations to ensure that the roles of each are complementary, not duplicative. Our approach really has been to rely on the leads, but we are seeing, and you see with these numbers, that it makes sense for us to be more involved in that generation of leads ourselves. Often we're finding that leads are coming in through the contacts that we've developed locally. And sometimes those are the best leads or most successful leads you can get. I said at the outset of my presentation I'd provide a glimpse of 2013 initiatives. We are planning an event on June 7th for local companies to learn about doing business with China. It's going to feature 3 local companies who are either buying from or selling to China. So it's a kind of a very interesting component of the forum. We will have a commercial consul there. We will have a panel of professionals, Deloitte, Blake Castles Graydon, HSBC will be the professionals providing technical expertise. And then we have government organizations at the federal and provincial level, as well as Export Development Canada, that can help describe to companies how they can help them with their investments. In October, Mayor Burton and Ford Canada will host a roundtable to examine ways to sustain and grow the auto industry in Ontario. We are in the process of engaging the economic development staff in 17 municipalities who either have an automotive company in their municipality or 30 or more major suppliers. They will all be engaged in that process, developing an action plan to grow and to sustain and grow that industry in our municipalities. And the last part of my presentation relates to business attraction. It will be an area of focus, and it is a focus in 2013, including these 3 things. Firstly, we were successful in a federal grant application, so we're going to get some matching dollars, which is a contribution for the development of sector information on our website. And we're finding, particularly with site selectors, inquiries that are coming from outside the area, the website is really where we want to drive them to. They're finding that kind of information, particularly on sector-based aspects of Oakville, is very important to them. What we will have when this project is completed is a customizable brochure. So a company around the world can go on our site, pick and choose what information they want, and download it into a very specific brochure. Realtors will find that particularly attractive for the work that they are doing. Secondly, we're going to implement the initiatives I previously mentioned, which will help facilitate business retention, expansion, and attraction. And lastly, we're going to create a video for the professional services sector. That's one of the things that came up at our Business Leaders Forum last year. Some of the professional service companies said that they could really use our help in trying to show how great a place Oakville is for investment. The other benefit to us in providing a video like that is it will help us fill that office space that's now been created in Oakville. So we will produce a similar video to the one that we did for our trip to China, but it will focus on professional services for investment attraction with our new office development. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you very much, Director. Council, do you have questions? Ray Orbison there, do you have any questions? Actually, Ray Charles is who you're reminding. Councillor Demoff.
Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for coming back so many months after you were here before. The space that has been built, how much of that is vacant? I know the one large building, I think is it Cantera? It still looks like it's completely vacant, that was built a year ago. Are there any other developments that are in a similar situation?
Through you, Mayor Burton. No, it's really the Cantera 3 flex buildings across from the Ford plant that have remained vacant for a while. They've had a lot of interest in the site, and for various reasons, they haven't been able to get the tenants in. But they are continuing to receive interest. If I could just add to that, one of the things that has been beneficial is the addition of the bus route that was put in when Siemens went into the building. So that has been an added benefit that's helped generate some of the interest in those buildings.
Another plus for Transit First as policy. Mr. St. George, thank you very much for your hard work on behalf of our town's economy and for this great report tonight.
Thank you.
Council, could we have a motion to receive? Councillor Knoll, thank you. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. That brings us to item C1, and Councillor Bird, would you, what's your pleasure, sir? Would you like to go into camera?
Yeah, I'd like to go into camera on part of it, because the confidential portion.
All right.
I have a couple of questions contained therein, and I think we should hear them in camera.
Let me get you in camera here. Councillor Duddick?
Before we go in camera, could we just deal with the Heritage Advisory so that staff might be able to depart?
All righty. Sure. Councillor Duddick is moving the recommendation in the agenda.
Yes, and I just would like to make a comment. We had an individual at our committee meeting request to have it duly noted in the minutes how the person voted in regards to an item. And we had to remind the individual, as did the clerk, that we don't have that provision within our committee. That being said, I did offer to draw attention to the fact that committee member Jamie McCrae was opposed to this item at committee, but it was passed with the support of the committee.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That is adopted and approved. Now we need a motion to We need a motion to go into a session closed to the public for the purpose of considering litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality. This is moved by Councillor Byrd. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. And Madam Clerk, if you could arrange things for us.